Before we begin, comment your country so I know where the story is reaching. The first time Calder Boone saw her, he thought the storm had carved a human shape out of the darkness just to test his courage. Snow hammered the plane so heavily that the world looked erased. His lantern barely cut a circle through the night. And yet there she stood, half collapsed beside the fence line, leaning against a broken gate like she tried to outrun winter itself. She was enormous, towering well over any person he'd ever seen. Shoulders broad as a barn beam, skin marked by old scars and fresh wounds, long black hair frozen into strands that whipped in the wind. Her breath came in ragged clouds, each one smaller than the last. Calder tightened his grip on the lantern, but he didn't reach for the rifle slung on his back. Her eyes were what stopped him. Not the size, not the scars. The eyes. Deep gold brown, sharp, alert, eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime learning when to strike and when to run. Tonight, she was done running. Calder approached slowly. "You stay away," she rasped, voice barely holding together. He didn't move closer, didn't move back. "I will," he said, "but you're freezing to death right here." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the wind clawing at the fence posts. Then, as if her strength finally gave out, she slid to her knees. Calder's jaw clenched. He'd seen animals fall like that. Men, too. Once that kind of exhaustion set in, a person didn't last long. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just stared at him, as though trying to decide whether he was a threat or a last chance. Calder took off his coat and tossed it toward her, keeping distance. "If you want to fight me later. Right now, put that on." She hesitated, then grabbed the coat with slow, trembling fingers. When she pulled it around her massive frame, she seemed even larger, like the storm couldn't hide her anymore. At last she whispered, "Talai." The name carried weight, strength, history. He nodded. "Come on, Talai. My cabin is close. You'll die out here." Talai's gaze hardened. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he answered. "Not a damn thing." Something in her expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, a spark of something he couldn't name. But she stood, barely. Every step to the cabin looked like a war she wasn't sure she could win. Calder kept ahead, letting her follow at her own pace. Inside, the small one-room cabin glowed with lamplight and wood smoke. He opened the door wide. Talai paused on the threshold, eyes scanning every corner like a wild creature ready to bolt. "You're safe," Calder said simply. Safe. A small word. But she reacted like she hadn't heard it in a decade. He set a bowl of warm stew on the table and stepped aside. No pressure. No questions. No expectations. She approached it slowly, one heavy breath at a time, then ate with the silent desperation of someone who'd been surviving on fear alone. When she finally lifted her gaze, Calder felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear. Recognition. She wasn't just exhausted. She was hunted. Talai studied him for a long moment. Snow hissed faintly against the window. The fire crackled. She didn't blink. Then she said the sentence that would change the entire course of his quiet life. "You are not giving me back." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a plea. It was a terrified demand of someone who had already learned what the world did to people her size, her heritage, her strength. Calder pulled out a chair and sat across from her, meeting her gaze head-on. "No," he said. "I don't hand people over." She stared at him like she didn't know what to do with a man who didn't want power over her, as if the thought itself didn't fit into the world she'd known. Outside, the storm roared. Inside, a quiet shift took place, barely visible, barely spoken, but real. She stayed awake long after Calder fell asleep in his chair, studying the lines of his face in the firelight. His calmness seemed almost strange. Men usually acted loud, or cruel, or afraid. He was none of those things. And for the first time since the nightmare that drove her into the storm, she felt her lungs loosen enough to breathe. By dawn, snow had buried half the cabin walls. Calder shoveled the path while Talai watched from the window, still wrapped in his coat. She looked smaller like that. Not physically, but in the way someone looks when they are trying to understand a life they didn't believe existed. When he returned, she spoke again, quiet but certain. "I don't understand you." Calder shrugged. "Nothing to understand. You needed help. Talai stepped closer, shadows from the fire sliding over the strong lines of her face. Most men fear me. It's the storm I fear, Calder replied. You're just tall. For the first time, she almost smiled. Almost. But when the wind shifted, carrying distant hoofbeats through the trees, her shoulders tensed so sharply Calder noticed instantly. Someone was looking for her, and the peace of this tiny cabin was about to be tested in ways neither of them expected. The hoofbeats didn't come closer. Not yet. They drifted through the cold morning air, distant enough to feel like ghosts, but close enough to make Talai step away from the window as if the sound itself carried claws. Calder set down the shovel and wiped frost from his beard. You know who they are. Talai didn't answer. She just stared at the floorboards, her broad shoulders rising and falling with slow, careful breaths. The kind a wounded animal takes when trying to hide pain. Calder didn't push her. He never did. Instead, he poured hot water into a basin and slid it toward her. Warm your hands. They are turning blue. She hesitated, not because she didn't need it. She did, but because kindness always came at a cost in her world, and she didn't understand his rules yet. Eventually, she set her massive hands in the steam. The basin trembled under the weight of them. Calder watched her in the soft firelight. It was impossible not to notice everything about her, the scars, the bruises, the unimaginable strength she carried just by existing. But what struck him most was something quieter. Talai didn't seem used to being looked at without fear. She finally lifted her gaze. You heard them. Riders. Yeah, Calder replied, and they weren't out for Sunday sightseeing. Talai swallowed hard, jaw tightening. They'll return. They always return. Then we'll deal with it when they do. Her brows pulled together. Weird? Why do you speak like I'm your problem to carry? Because you're on my land, in my cabin, and alive because I brought you in, Calder said. That makes you my responsibility until you can stand without shaking. She flinched, not from the words, but from the gentleness behind them, as if she'd never heard anything like that in her life. By midday, the storm had moved east, leaving the plains washed in bright white. Light reflected off every surface, almost blinding. Inside the cabin, the sudden warmth from the sun softened the air, loosening the frozen stillness that had gripped them since the night before. Calder fixed a loose hinge on the door while Talai watched from the corner, wrapped in his coat, hair drying in heavy dark waves down her back. At one point he caught her staring, expression unreadable. What? You move different, she said. How's that? Slow, careful, like someone who expects to live a long time. Calder smirked. It's a habit. Talai tilted her head, eyes narrowing just a little. You confuse me, rancher. You act like I'm not a burden. You aren't. You act like I'm not dangerous. You aren't to me. You act like, she paused, searching for a word she rarely used, like I deserve safety. The silence after that was thick. Calder didn't try to fill it. He simply said, everyone deserves safety, even you. Her throat tightened. She looked away, like the truth of that was harder to handle than the snowstorm that almost killed her. Later in the afternoon, she tried to stand. She'd been on her feet before, but this time she tried to walk across the room without using the table for support. Her legs nearly buckled. Calder reached for her, carefully, slowly, letting her see every movement before he made it. Easy, he said. You're still healing. She steadied herself but didn't pull away. He noticed her breathing change, not from pain, but from something unfamiliar, trust. Talai was taller by at least 2 heads, and her shadow swallowed him completely when she stood this close. Yet Calder didn't step back. He didn't have the instincts of a fearful man. She studied him with unsettling intensity. You think I won't harm you? Why? Because if you wanted to, you would have already. She blinked, surprised at the simple logic. And because, Calder added, I don't see a monster. I see a woman who's been hunted too long. Her lips parted slightly, not quite a smile, not quite disbelief, something between the two. I have never understood men like you, she whispered. Neither have I, Calder replied. By evening the temperature dropped again. The fire roared to life as Calder added more wood. The cabin glowed warm and gold, and shadows danced across the rough logs of the walls. Talai sat by the hearth, wrapped in a blanket this time instead of a coat. The warmth softened her features, made her look younger and more human than the fierce warrior she appeared in daylight. When Calder sat down across from her, she began speaking without looking up. I was taken 3 weeks ago. Traders. They wanted to sell me far from my people, far from anyone who might come searching. Her voice didn't crack, but the firelight revealed the slightest tremor in her hands. They beat me when I fought. They tied me like an animal. They bragged about the price they'd get. Her jaw tightened. I broke free during a snowstorm. They followed. Always. I ran until the sky disappeared. Calder didn't move, didn't interrupt. He understood the cost of telling a story someone never wanted to say out loud. She finally met his gaze, eyes burning with something raw and honest. I am not afraid of death, Calder Boone. I have walked beside it many times. But to be captured again, she exhaled slowly, a sound full of buried terror. I would rather the storm take me. Calder leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. That's not going to happen. Not while you're under my roof. Talai's breath hitched, just once. You speak that like a vow. It is. The fire popped. A spark floated up the chimney. For a moment, the entire cabin held still. Then she spoke the second sentence that would alter everything. Then I stay. Not because she trusted him fully. Not because she felt safe yet. But because for the first time since she escaped, she wasn't alone. Later, after the dishes were clean and the fire settled into a slow, steady burn, Talai lay on the floor mat near the hearth while Calder took the chair. She watched him with half-lidded eyes, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep. But just before she drifted off, she said something so soft he almost missed it. You have given me more kindness in one day than I have known in years. Calder didn't answer. He didn't need to. The way she relaxed, fully, deeply, no longer ready to leap up at every noise, was answer enough. And somewhere outside in the deepening dark, the hoofbeats returned. Closer this time. Slower. Like men searching in the shadows. Talai didn't wake, but Calder did. He went to the window, watching the tree line with the stillness of a man who knew storms come in more shapes than snow. When he finally returned to his chair, he glanced at the sleeping woman, a woman who could break him in half, yet trusted him enough to sleep unguarded. He exhaled a long breath. Everything in his life was about to change. And he knew it. The giant Apache woman said one sentence. And the lone rancher's life changed forever. The morning broke quiet, too quiet. Snow lay untouched outside, smooth as a sheet of white canvas. Calder stepped onto the porch with a cup of steaming coffee, but he didn't take a sip. He was listening. The planes were holding their breath. Behind him, the cabin door creaked. Talai filled the doorway, tall enough that the frame seemed built too small for her. Her hair fell in dark, heavy waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied the stillness. You heard them again, she said. Calder didn't deny it. Hoofbits. Close. Slow. She stepped beside him, the boards groaning under her weight. They are hunters. Men like them don't give up. Calder examined her expression, wary, controlled, but not broken. She'd survived storms far older than he'd ever known. You healed enough to walk a little, he said. That's something. It is not enough to outrun them. Good thing you're not running anymore. She turned her head toward him, eyes narrowing. You think I stay because I am weak. I think you stay because you're tired of freezing alone. Talai's gaze softened, just slightly. For her, softness was a rare and precious currency. Later that day, Calder saddled his old roan gelding. Supplies were running low, and if trouble was coming, he wanted food stocked, bandages ready, and the sheriff informed, without telling him too much. Talai watched him tighten the cinch strap. You go to Red Creek. Just for a few hours. She folded her arms, shadows cutting across her broad frame. You should not return here tonight. They might follow you. Calder stepped close enough that the top of his head barely reached her collarbone. You really think I'm leaving you alone in this cabin after everything? Talai went silent, not with disagreement, but with something heavier, something she didn't know how to speak. Finally, She murmured, "I do not wish you harm." "You won't." "That is not what I mean." He waited, but she turned her face away, refusing to finish. Red Creek was a rough, wind-scraped cluster of buildings surrounded by frozen earth and gossip. The moment Calder walked into the general store, the conversation stopped. Everyone sensed something in his posture, tension, alertness, something unspoken. "Morning, Boone," Old Man Weller said behind the counter. "Storm Treorton, you all right?" "It's passin'," Calder replied. Weller squinted at him. "You look like a man hid in a secret." Calder's jaw tightened. No one the town needs to worry about. But Red Creek loved worrying. Loved talking, too. By the time Calder left, half the store was speculating. Who was he hiding? A fugitive? A woman? Both? Calder mounted his horse, giving the town one last glance. Word would spread faster than he could ride. It always did. The sun dipped low by the time he returned. The sky had turned molten orange, spilling across the plains like fire on snow. Calder felt the tension ease in his shoulders only when the cabin came into view. Smoke rising from the chimney, a sign that Taylor was awake and tending the fire. But the moment he opened the door, he froze. Taylor stood in the center of the room, holding his old hunting bow. The bow looked almost small in her massive hands. "You have poor weapons," she said calmly. "They've done fine for me. They won't stop the men who want me." Calder set the supplies down and closed the door behind him. "Drop it." She didn't. Instead, she walked toward him, slowly, powerfully, each step sending a faint vibration through the floorboards. "I am not hiding anymore. I didn't ask you to. But you treat me like something fragile," she said, voice low. "Like I will break. I will not." She stopped inches from him. Calder had to tilt his head up to meet her gaze. "I never thought you'd break," he said. "I thought you deserved rest." For a moment, neither moved, neither breathed. Then Taylor exhaled, long and unsteady. "You say things no man has ever said to me. Maybe that's why they don't deserve you." Her eyes flickered. Not anger, not disbelief. Something deeper. Night fell with a pale moon rising over the snow. Calder sat sharpening a knife near the fire while Taylor lay on the floor mat, wrapped in a thick blanket. She'd been quiet for hours, her gaze distant, thoughts drifting somewhere old and painful. Finally, she spoke. "Calder Boone." He looked up. "I have not told you everything." He waited. "When I escaped," she said slowly, "I did not run only from men. I ran from a fate. My people, they believe I am marked. For battles, for hardship, for exile. No one ever expected me to know peace." She turned her face away. "I did not expect it either." Calder put down the knife. "Taylor." "No," she shook her head. "Let me finish." Her voice softened in a way he had never heard from her. "I am not used to being inside a home. I am not used to warmth. I am not used to someone giving me food without a hidden price." Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with something heavier than tears. "I wake every night thinking I am still tied to a wagon." Calder moved closer, not touching her, just sitting there. "You're here now," he said, "and nothing's tying you to anything." She swallowed hard. Her next words came out shaken, unguarded. "When you say I am safe, I want to believe you, more than I should." Calder didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of trust, of fear, of something quietly growing. Just after midnight, a knock rattled the cabin door. Not gentle, not hesitant. A demand. Calder stood instantly. Taylor rose too, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket, towering like a storm-given human shape. The knock came again. Harder. "Taylor," Calder whispered, "don't open your mouth. Don't move." But she stepped forward anyway. He caught her wrist, not to stop her, but to warn her. Her pulse was steady, too steady. She wasn't afraid this time. She was ready. Calder opened the door only a crack. Two men stood in the moonlit snow. Hard eyes, cold smiles. "Evening, Boone," one said. "We heard you're sheltering something big." Calder's expression didn't change. Ain't your business. Oh, it is, the man replied. See, we lost something. And then something happened no one expected. Talai stepped forward into the lantern light, towering behind Calder like a guardian spirit. Her voice rolled out steady and unbroken. I stay with him. 4 simple words, but they struck the night like a hammer. The men went pale, not because she was enormous, though she was, not because she was fierce, though she was that too, but because they saw something they had never seen in her. She wasn't running anymore. She had chosen a place, chosen a man, chosen a future. The men exchanged a look, calculation, frustration, fear, and mounted their horses. We'll be back, one spat. Noted, Calder said. They rode into the darkness. Calder shut the door, slid the bolt, and turned to face her. Talai stood still, breathing slowly. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what she had just claimed. Calder stepped close. Did you mean that? Talai lowered her head until her forehead nearly touched his. I stay, she whispered, if you will have me. He didn't answer with words. He placed his hand over Hayes, massive, warm, calloused, and held on. And in that quiet cabin on the edge of a cold western valley, 2 people who never expected to belong anywhere finally found their beginning.